Good afternoon, everyone. This is Charlie Dobbins. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Mastermind program Frequently Asked Questions phone call. Today we have a very special guest with us, a client of mine named Spencer Culler. And Spencer just recently acquired a property. I say recently, within the last 2 weeks or so. He just acquired a 70-plus unit property, and he is going to, he's enabled us to bring him into our fold here and ask him any questions that you have. We really, he's been very cordial by giving us the ability to be entirely candid with him and ask any, and he will be candid with us and answer any questions that we have about what it's like to go out there and buy the larger size properties. Just as a, want to get clarification because these types of seminars are always touchy. If you can hear me correctly, if you can hear me well, if you could just type into the chat box that I am coming through loud and clear. I just want to make sure that that is accurate. And so if somebody just wants to type something in and let me know, there we go. Good thing that Spencer can hear us. Anybody else can hear me would be fantastic, just to let me know. And nobody else is is typing in. Okay, hold on a second. Let me make sure. Everyone hear me. Let's see. So Spencer. Let's try this. Laney. Mary, can you hear me? Hello, Mary. Okay, son of a gun. Okay, let's see why nobody is hearing me. Oh, okay, a friend of mine just dialed in, but nobody seems to be using the text box. Okay, so let's see. I can hear you. Okay, so everybody. All right, let's. Okay, for some reason, thank you very much. Somebody's doing me a huge service here in providing me with information that I cannot see the chat box. And I do appreciate that because that's news to me. So that tells me that when we get to the how about, oh, okay, there we go. How about we raise our hands? There we go. Thank you, Ray. Yes, okay, everybody can hear me. I'm sorry, I was looking in the wrong box. My apologies. I was looking in the chat box. I should have been looking in the questions section. My apologies. That's live television for you folks. So thank you very much, everybody. Let's get started here. And what I want to do is just to kind of lay down some ground rules because, I mean, the purpose of these phone calls is to really create and foster a sense of community among all the members in this mastermind group. I want it to always be a place that you can come and ask any questions that you have. You know, no such thing as a stupid question, but feel free to ask it because chances are very good that if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it too. So please step on up and ask any questions that you have. We want to make sure that if you need any assistance with finding money, with finding debt financing, with finding deals, you can always come to these types of groups and feel very open with asking away. If you're working on something that's working for you, let us know what's happening. The whole idea behind this is just to bring your business to the next level. We want to make sure that all of you can have a place to go and feel safe. And more importantly, and this is something that's kind of unique about this mastermind, is, you know, I have no issue with people in the mastermind getting to know each other outside the mastermind and sharing ideas and working together on deals. I mean, that's the whole point of this, is that it's a community where everybody can communicate. So please, if that's the case, you want to share your phone number, share your email address, let other people know what you're doing. You can absolutely do those things while you're here. And as it says, open line, so please, I know Steve Martin once said, be courteous, kind, and forgiving, because what we're going to do is, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. And when I see your hand, that your hand is raised, I will unmute you and introduce you to the group. And then you can ask your question away, be it to Spencer, to myself, to anybody else in the group. Please feel free. So I just ask that all members of the group be courteous to others. You know, no swear words or anything like that. I just want to make sure that that everybody feels comfortable that way. So let me go online here, and I'm just going to bring up my friend Spencer. Now, Spencer, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you very much for being here with us, Spencer. You know, you and I have been in this hunt for quite a while now, and you know, we're going to share with everybody here on the call one of your success stories, or a couple of your success stories. But at the same time, as I said, and you've agreed, any questions? Everything's on the table. So if anybody has any wants to know really how this sausage gets made in this business, this is how it's done. So, you know, what I also did here is, for those people that haven't jumped over there yet, I just took a screenshot of your website, and I remember helping you set this up, and when you got it together and made it happen, it was really a great little addition to your business. But why don't we start at the beginning, Spencer? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, how old you are, what your family situation is, what your job situation is. We really want to get to know you and understand what it took to get you from nothing to the number of units that you have today.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to butt in or ask anywhere along the way. I'm here to answer any questions you have. My name is Spencer Culler, and our company's name is Apartment Investors. We started that business probably four or 5 years ago, but really started the bringing on and working with investors a year and a half to 2 years ago. I grew up in a small town, southeast Kansas, of about 7,000 people, and my dad ready-mix concrete plant and some rock quarries, and my mom was a school teacher, and I have a twin sister and a few brothers. But I'd always kind of wanted to be in business for myself, but wasn't really sure what kind of business I wanted. I had always been really interested in real estate, and after I went out and got a job. I was working at a software company doing marketing, believe it or not. And on the side, my older brother and I and my dad started seeking out different types of businesses. We actually started with building houses here in Kansas City. We were building some spec houses and selling them. At one time, I think I was building 5 or 6 houses, had a couple framing crews and a full-time job, which I don't recommend to anybody. It's a lot of work. But kind of as we saw the market slowing down and houses starting to sit on the market longer and longer, and one thing with houses like that, spec houses, is you don't have any income and you don't know how much you're going to make until it sells. And so that was always kind of scary, and we started seeing the market slow down on sales. So we started looking at other things. We actually sold off all our house that we were building, and then really my father and I, who's also my business partner, went to a seminar by Scott Scheel on commercial real estate investing. We studied that for a while. We weren't sure what type of properties we wanted to start with. We actually started with a small retail center that we invested in. And that was definitely a case of we didn't know exactly what we didn't know and didn't have the best guidance at the time. And property, we probably overpaid a little bit, and we hit it at the wrong time of the market and did some things like master leases that we probably wouldn't do now, knowing what we know. But that property kind of struggled along. It paid itself, but we didn't make the returns we were looking for. So I kept working full time and kept seeking out more education. I actually met Charlie through this coaching program that he's involved with at the time.
You can mention names, Spencer.
Yeah, I was at Dave Lindahl coaching program, and let me pick my coach, and I knew what we wanted to do with taking our business to the next level with bringing on private investors and the sizes of properties that we wanted to invest in. So I really sought out Charlie there as my coach, and
probably because my wife wasn't available, right?
Yeah, and actually I've talked with his wife for a few times, and she's been extremely helpful for us as we started our management company and other things. But let's say about 2.5 years ago, we bought our first property that was a multifamily.
Okay, let's stop right there. Let me ask a couple questions. How big was that first property?
40 units.
Okay, so it was a good sized property. It was, I mean, that's the same size as my first deal. Now, how did you find that deal? And first off, it's in your backyard, correct?
It is. It's in our backyard.
All right. Now, one of the things that you've done that a lot of new investors always take into consideration or have trouble understanding is you can do this in your own backyard. So you had the choice between either, I know that you were looking at places in Oklahoma, you were looking at places in Alabama, but you ended up
Texas. We did a lot of looking in Texas.
Okay. So why did you ultimately decide that your area was where you wanted to stick around?
Ultimately, we decided that because we knew the area really well, and it was more about control and risk to us. We felt like come hell or high water, if it was in our backyard, we could take it over, manage it, and make it a success, where it would be extremely difficult to do that from a long distance starting out. And we had aspirations of someday starting our own management company, and so it was just more about control and knowing the market.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you touched upon as an early problem in finding deals that met your criteria is something that I just happened to come across the exact same problem. I was speaking with a broker down in South Carolina, and that is that in your area, because of what happened over the last 40 years with the economy in your area, there are very few types of properties that meet your criteria within your age category and the age of your property. In other words, you can go down to Texas, and back in the 80s, Texas had a building boom, and there are tons of multifamily properties down in Texas that were built in the 80s. But you can't find that in Kansas City, in the Kansas City area, can you?
It's pretty difficult in the size ranges we're looking at. To get into the 80s, you have to mostly go to much bigger properties, which require a lot more capital and other things.
Okay. So
most of them that we were looking at were a little older.
All right. Now, how did you find this deal?
That was really interesting. I want to step back just a little bit, though, before that. We actually had 2 projects under contract before we closed our first deal. That during the course of the due diligence, we actually walked away from for different reasons, both having to do with the amount of deferred maintenance and not being able to make the returns once we found out how much needed work and how much money it was going to take to do that. So I just want to put that out there. Big part in our learning in making sure we did it right.
Okay, now what about the due diligence process that uncovered these problems that you didn't see beforehand?
Luckily, when we did the due diligence on these, and this is where it really set us apart from the first retail investment, was that we had an experienced team with us that helped us do the due diligence at first. And the things we found were the financials didn't match what we'd been given before. We found some that had a lot more, like Section 8 and other types of housing credits that we didn't expect to be on the property. I told weren't there. But mostly it came down to deferred maintenance. I know one of the properties was close to a river and had tons of foundation issues that you couldn't see. They'd covered up a lot of it. You couldn't see until you actually started walking the units. But luckily we had some really experienced people with us that helped us see that. Because one of the things I think is really important getting started is to get with people that help you learn what you don't know. Because there's a ton of things in this business that if you don't know, it can really slow down your growth. It's business. If you do deals right, it's much easier to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So you passed on that deal. You know, what did it cost you to get into that deal and get out of that deal? What was your total out-of-pocket cost?
I think on that one, it ended up costing us somewhere between $5,000 and $7,500.
Oh, that's pretty considerable. So where did you spend your money?
A lot of it was the first one we looked at we were looking at assuming a loan that had some bonds with it, and it was extremely complicated on the legal side. So most of it was legal. Oh,
all right. So it wasn't so much a a physical due diligence more than it was a legal due diligence cost.
Yes, but it hurt to walk away from that and lose that money. But there were damages to the property that needed to be fixed were over $1 million. So it's $5,000 to $7,000 compared to $1 million. I think not every day that we walked away.
Yep. Good.
But when we finally found our first property, we actually found it without a broker. We found it on our own. We actually did a letter campaign that we sent out to property owners in the area. And this particular owner called me about 9 months after I sent out the letter.
Really?
And he'd been holding on to it and called me up and asked me if we were still looking. And,
now, what was the list? Where'd you get the list?
That's the thing. In Kansas, it's really difficult. We actually created our own list through tax records and information we could find online.
Wow.
But it took a lot of time to do, but it was definitely worth it. I know some of the other markets, if you're in Dallas or other areas, that list is pretty easy to get. Kansas is a non-disclosure state, so it becomes much difficult.
So, I mean, chances are very good this guy's not getting these types of letters on a regular basis.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. All right, so no broker involved. How did that transaction go down?
It was really pretty interesting. He called me up. We got the financials from him. I started looking at it. I almost sold the deal off to another broker because at the time I didn't think it was big enough in my head, that we were going after something 150 units or bigger, because that's what I'd been told you needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we almost passed on an amazing opportunity. I almost sold for like $50,000, $60,000, which sounds great. But when you look back, there were 2 years in that property. We increased the value by like 75% on
That's
it. That would have been huge.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that. So you were ultimately either bird dogging or wholesaling. You're thinking about bird dogging or wholesaling this deal to some other investor.
I was.
Yeah.
And thankfully, they didn't know what we had either. We didn't do it. But when it finally came down to we wanted to do it, we wanted to move forward, it was an Indian doctor that lived here in town that owned the property, and he'd owned it since it was built, and had just not kept it up very well at all. Just he'd paid it off 10 years ago, so he was making cash flow no matter what. And I actually negotiated it with his partner over his kitchen table.
Is that right? Isn't
And it was,
that the thing that amazes me, and this comes back all the time, is I remember that one woman sitting in the front row in Cincinnati. I said, "Why haven't you made any offers yet?" She goes, "Because I'm afraid to approach these big companies that own apartment buildings." And I'm like, "I've never dealt with a big company. I've always dealt with a person." And just to hear that you did this, like it was a kitchen table sale, as they used to call it in the insurance business, and that's how you did it. That's fantastic.
yes, it was pretty funny. We did all our negotiations at the kitchen table, but I kind of got to know him at first, and we kind of hit it off, and he trusted me and liked me and thought we could perform, and I think that made all the difference.
That's great. So what were the numbers on that one? I mean, let's talk from the beginning. Did he give you a price of what he wanted the property for?
He did. I think he wanted like 1.4 million for it.
Okay.
And we ended up negotiating it. We bought it for, I believe it was 1.175.
Wow.
And then we added in a $30,000 repair credit to that.
Okay.
So we actually raised the price and then took that out of the proceeds to do some of the renovations to the property that
Okay.
it desperately needed.
Like what were some of the
back,
things?
This property actually needed new roofs. It needed all new decks, all the way across the front. The landscaping was completely overgrown. The mailbox was falling over and rusty. I mean, the property was in pretty bad shape cosmetically, but one thing we were able to see on the property was that the bones of it were really good, and the location was nice on it. So we went in after doing inspections for units, and we went and walked every unit. We came back and negotiated that $30,000 repair credit into the price with them. And instead of taking that out of the price, we added it onto the price, and then it got rebated back to us at closing.
But that's not nowhere near enough money to do what you just talked about.
He went ahead and did the roofs himself.
Oh, great!
Before we closed. So really what we had to do was the decks, the landscaping, and then every turn of a unit we were renovating the interiors, but we paid for that.
Wow. Let me see. We got a question here. I'm going to just blow it up so I can read it and see. This is coming from Peter Hitchens. Spencer, do you have an extensive checklist that you now use when you do due diligence? Did you develop it yourself, or did you get it from a coach or an attorney? I added the or an attorney part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we definitely have a thorough checklist that we go through on due diligence. Part of that list we got from Charlie and Kate, and then we kind of added some things and took away things as we went.
Yeah.
On each property.
Yeah.
And part of that I put out on my blog on apartmentinvestors.com that we put out some of those checklists on there.
Good. All right, so 1.1 million. Let's talk how you got the deal financed. How'd you pull this all together? Because this is your first deal. You've never done apartments before. Now you've got to go get debt, and I assume you had to go out and raise some money from the equity side, or why don't you Give us the whole background.
Yeah, well, this one we actually did. We were my dad and his business over the years, when they had extra cash, they would go out and buy land. And land is great, but it doesn't produce cash flow on it. So one of the things we wanted to do in partnering with my dad on this business was we wanted to create a retirement income for him, and also have a business for me and income from. So on this one, we actually took some pasture land that was bought 30 years ago. It was producing about $1,000 a year in income, sold it, and 1031 exchanged it into this property.
Okay. So how much? How much did you get out of that land sale?
I think it was between 250 and 300,000.
Okay, so that was your down payment right there.
Yeah, and we used that. We actually didn't bring in any investors in that one other than my father.
Okay. So to make that 40-unit deal happen, you needed to raise about $300,000.
Right.
Okay.
And we had some investors lined up, potential investors for that, but for that one we didn't need it. One of the things we wanted to do was prove ourselves before we went out and started getting private money. I think that was more of our limitation we put on ourselves than something that you have to do. But we definitely took that approach to going out and raising money.
Okay.
But in it we went from a piece of land that was producing about $1,000 a year to a 40-unit apartment complex that was producing over $60,000 a year in cash flow off of it, and also a $24,000 a year management fee for me.
That's fantastic. That is great. Now, here's the real clincher. Didn't you refinance the deal?
We did. 2 years later, and before we did that, we at first started out with a third-party property management company on it. They lasted about 3 months, and they were just not running the property that we wanted to. We couldn't get reports. We couldn't get occupancy where we wanted. They saw the property kind of out as it was, I say. So we fired them. We hired a different management company that we did a ton of work on. We thought were better, but they were having a hard time getting the property leased. They actually got the property down to 65% occupancy over the next 3 months, and thought they were doing a good job. They actually told us they were doing a good job and couldn't understand why we would fire them. But we ended up firing them after another 6 months. So in 6 months, we went through 2 property management companies. We'd made basically zero money on the property.
Wow.
I took over the management after that, and we started our own management company. And within 45 days, we had it 100% occupied with a waiting list, and actually raised the rents $50 a month.
Isn't that amazing? See, nobody loves your baby as much as you do.
Yeah, nobody takes the time, and I'm really big on marketing and seeing it how it should be. So, one of the things we did is get the units ready, and we upgraded it, and so we only showed per units to people when they were leasing, and that went a really long way. But after that, then over the next, say, 12 months, we had really stabilized the property. We'd increased the net operating income enough that we were actually able to go out and get a Fannie Mae non-recourse loan. We refinanced the property. For the loan amount on that then was $1.3 million. So over $100,000 more than we paid for the property. It's a new loan, plus we took out our original equity and turned the property into a non-recourse loan.
That's fantastic. Wow.
And that kind of leads into then this next property that we purchased we actually took the proceeds from that. We took some of them, and then we actually went out and raised money for the rest of it. And just closed two weeks ago, or a week. I guess it's only been a week now. It feels like 2 weeks.
Yeah, a week ago Monday.
Yeah, we closed on a 72-unit property in the Kansas City market that we're doing a similar kind of rehab and a re-tenanting of it.
Okay, so the first deal, 40 units, you did it through a letter campaign. You were able to refinance. The thing is cash flowing beautifully, and you were able now to roll this up into the newest acquisition, which is a 72-unit deal. And let's talk about this one. How did you find this one? Because I'm a little bit, you and I started working together during the 40-unit acquisition. But we were together through the slogging through the mud on this 72-unit deal. So why don't you start, and how'd you find this deal?
Well, we actually found this one again through a letter campaign. We'd looked at a ton of properties with brokers, but we're having a hard time actually buying them for a number that made sense to us. So we sent out some other letter campaigns. The owner of the property, who was an attorney, called us up, and I went out. We sent out like 150 letters. We got probably 7 calls from it, and I went out and toured all the different properties, and we looked at this one, and we saw a lot of the same things that we saw in the first one that we liked. It had pitched roofs, had a good location that got over 15,000 cars a day driving by out in front. But it was a little down. It did have pitched roofs that were brand new. It didn't have the best reputation, but it was in a good market and a good area. It just needed some love. The owner used to live in town, but after some family issues moved, I think got remarried and moved down to Arkansas, and was trying to pack and manage this thing himself one day a week, which is really difficult to do on something as big as 70 units.
Yeah. And the guy had a reputation for being cheap.
Yeah, that's put nicely.
Exactly. So, all right, so you go out there, you look at this, you're with your dad, you look at the property, and you think, okay, this one looks like that 40 unit. Let's do it again. And so how'd the negotiations go for this one? I mean, there's no broker involved, so this is strictly an off-market deal. There's no property package. What'd the financials look like? Were they even existing?
The financials were there, but they weren't ones that I would trust very well. The expenses we could see, we actually got a tax return, so we could see what the expenses kind of had been, and I knew the market expenses, so we went into it that way, looking at that. Income, his collections were extremely poor, and his occupancy was poor. I think he was about 82% occupied in a 95% occupancy market.
Wow.
In the market, the rents were like $500 a month, and the market was around $650 or so.
Wow.
So we knew there was upside, but there was a reason. It was renting on price alone, and doing no repairs or anything to the property, so it had reached a lot of different maintenance. But we actually negotiated it. We sent him an LOI. There was definitely a disconnect between what he thought the property was worth and what we thought it worth. So it took a little while to get him closer to where we were. We actually agreed on.
I was just going to say, Spencer. Before we move on, I've got one of our members is. I'm going to unmute him and see if he can ask a question. Bob, are you ready? I'm going to unmute you now, and you are speaking to Spencer.
Hi, Spencer. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Okay. I'm located up in the Pacific Northwest near Seattle, just FYI. On your website, I see an investor section. I'm just curious, did you file a Series D to raise capital, or how are you raising capital with your investors?
Great question.
We did set up.
Sorry.
No, we did set up a private placement memorandum. We did the Reg D. We set all that legal documentation up first,
Okay.
before going out and finding a property.
Okay.
And we actually started talking to potential investors before we had a property too. We wanted to fill out how we went back and forth on this, but we wanted to know that the money was going to be there before we got the property. And I really, after going through this, think that that's really the only way to do it. You don't want to wait till you get the property and then go scrambling for the money.
Yeah, I've been there done that a few times. I know.
And you end up losing the property, and it's just frustrating, and you put a lot of time and money and work into it, and then it doesn't go through. So we actually, once we knew kind of what we felt comfortable that we were going to be able to raise, we went out and only looked at properties that fit that size. So we kind of backed into what size of property we were going to try to buy next based on what we felt we could raise with a pretty high certainty.
Spencer, did you actually have investors put the money into your fund, or just get commitments? In other words, did you have the cash available, and if so, what kind of cash-on-cash return are they typically looking for?
We didn't take a lot until we had the property under contract. We went out and talked to a lot of people. We felt them out. A lot of them were people that we had known for a while, so we felt pretty comfortable. But we also had some new people that we hadn't worked with before, but that had given us, we had a pretty high certainty that they were going to invest.
Okay.
And as far as return, we offered a preferred return on our investment, and they offered profit sharing over that.
And that's on a per deal basis, not on a fund basis, or
Right. We're going to do a fund at first, and what we didn't have the best reception, and it might have been how we were doing it, just how it was complicated, but we didn't have the best reception for that when we went out to talk to investors. They liked the property, but they weren't sure what other properties you were going to put in there with them. We had better luck raising money for a specific type of property.
Okay, so just for clarity, when you went out to Joe Investor and Mary Investor and said we're going to buy apartments. When they said yes, I'd like to invest, did you just get some kind of a commitment letter from them, or how did you keep them on the hook for when you needed their money?
We didn't get a commitment letter from them. It was through our relationships with them. We said, okay, we'll get back to you with the paperwork, and then we would send over the legal paperwork and get the signatures, the thing that we needed, and they usually did that when they were sending in their money.
Okay, and then this was done before you put out your LOI to the buyer, or during, or just timing-wise? Can you comment, please?
Well, we had been priming the pump, I guess you would say it, with potential investors for at least a year before that. And it was, so we didn't go back to them to collect the money until we had the property under contract, and then immediately we went back to collect. But we had been keeping them in the loop, what they were doing and what was going on, to gauge when they had money to.
Okay,
that's great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Bob. Great questions. Great questions. I appreciate that. And that, Bob, you made a very good point, is that identify these investors and then keep them in the loop as you go out there and try to find deals. And that's exactly what we did on our first deal. Is they all wanted to invest with us, and they're like, have we got a deal yet? Yeah, we're looking at a deal. And then they, a month later, no, we had to cancel that one because it didn't pencil out, or what have you. But that really helped to build up our credibility among our investors. So that's keeping the communication lines open is key. So.
Yeah, but we had been talking to them for a while, but I did get worried that they were maybe not going to come through, or that they were going to, because we had walked away from a deal that we were going to close on once we did the inspections, and I thought that was credibility with the investors. It actually improved it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we kind of sell ourselves as a real specialty fund, specialty investment.
So, if anybody else has any more questions, just use that box to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you if you want me to, or just type in the question in the box, and we'll get to you that way. But thanks, Bob. I appreciate you jumping on the line and showing people how how we're going to use this mastermind group. So, Spencer, let's go back to the purchase price. You guys how far off were you on the purchase price?
About 300,000.
Okay.
He was at 2.8. We ended up settling at 2.5, but we knew the property needed a lot of work. We actually put a $200,000 repair credit in that, so it was actually net to him at 2.3.
Okay, so let's talk about that repair credit. $200,000. When did you negotiate that? Before you did the due diligence or after the due diligence?
We did that before the due diligence with
Really?
the initial contract.
Okay. So after the due diligence, what changed with the offer?
Well, one of the smart things we put in the contract was that all units had to be rent ready.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was a great thing to put in the contract, is that within 48 hours before the closing, all units must be rent ready. And that took a huge weight off your shoulders as far as the cost of having the deal done.
Correct. Not that the seller tried to follow that, but that was definitely in the contract, and the seller signed it. They wanted to get, one thing we knew about this property is that the seller was tired of driving back and forth. We knew he was tired of the property. He was motivated to sell it. It was really just coming to an agreement. We knew he wanted to sell it. We wanted to buy it, and we're qualified. So we went back and forth, and at the end we just told him what we could do and let him come back to us, and he agreed. But we went through the due diligence and actually were surprised that the interior of the property was actually in better shape than the exterior. Which usually if the exterior is in horrible shape, the interior is in horrible shape too.
Right.
But we went, at the end of that, at the end of the due diligence, we knew we wanted to move forward, but we notified him of the units that needed to be ready, and what was wrong. We showed him an inspection report, but we actually didn't get any credits at that time. We just notified him of the rent-ready unit and moved forward with that.
Right. So in other words, at that point, you didn't have to go back and negotiate a repair credit for down units. You just brought to his attention that, hey, these 8 units had better be rent ready by closing, or we're not closing.
Right, we did. We notified them of that and didn't really hear, but we kept moving forward. We figured we would negotiate that closer to the closing if we needed to, because there would be more pressure at that point to get the deal done. And one thing people do is once they've sold it in their head, they don't want to go back. They're counting that money already.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But we moved forward. We had financing lined up on it. We had some investors in play. But then there was a real big turn of events, probably 2 weeks before we were originally supposed to close, where there was an incident on the property.
Oh yeah, folks, listen to this, just everybody, because this happens in this world. So please listen to what happened to this. Go ahead, Spencer.
Yeah, you try to prepare for things that could happen, but you just can't prepare for everything. But about 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks before we were supposed to close, actually somebody was shot on the property.
Yeah.
It wasn't somebody that lived there. Neither person lived there, but somebody was shot and later was killed. And so we're thinking, great. One, the reputation of the property is even worse now. the bank that was really going to finance it pulled out completely. They were worried about the repercussions.
And this was
So this
2
deal
weeks, 2 weeks before the close.
Yeah, and we had investors committed. We had our money was hard on the down payments. We had probably $30,000 at risk there. It was a little scary. And for a week or two there, I thought the deal wasn't going to go through. We decided that we still want to move forward after talking to the police department and other things. One thing the owner had not been doing was background checks, and let all these things, kind of problems, they can happen anywhere, but they pile up on properties where people haven't paid attention to them.
Yeah.
So we went out and found some new banks that were looking at it. One thing they told us, there needs to be a discount. We agreed with them. So we really went back and met with the seller directly and sat down with, said, this deal is not going to close. You're going to have to take it back out to the market after all this happened, and you're not going to get the offers you think you're going to get. Because of all this, we need a discount. And the banks were actually telling us too, we need a discount on the property. The owner thought it was no big deal. These things happen is what he told us. But,
Yeah.
I've never had one of those things happen in one of our properties.
No big deal.
No big deal. So we actually hammered him pretty hard on that, and ended up getting another $100,000 taken off the price. So it ended up being a $2.4 million purchase price with a $200,000 repair credit. Once we got that, we got the banks to commit, extended the closing because of his loan payoff could only be closed at certain days of the month. We moved that out. We had two issues that we had come up right before closing again.
Oh, yeah.
The first one was we notified him of the repair, the rent-ready units, and he did not budge on that at all.
Yeah.
First of all, the week before closing, when all this is supposed to be done, he off to Mexico and was
Incommunicado.
able to get in contact with at all until the Friday afternoon before Monday closing.
Right. So let me give us specifics here. You had said in the contract that all units needed to be rent ready, and everybody understood that. Everybody signed off on it. In addition to that, and this was, in a whole other section of the contract, you had asked for a $200,000 repair credit, and then subsequently, the bank came back and said, you need to reduce the price just for us to underwrite the deal. So there are those three components at play here. And he thought, well, hey, I already gave you $200,000 and I reduced the price. That means I'm off the hook for these units being rent ready. So you're on your own. And you said what, Spencer?
The case at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, the contract amendment we did, the price was reduced by this, but every other aspect of the contract stayed. And so we went back to that. We negotiated down on what he was going to offer us out of that to get the unit ready. He was not going to do the well. But we getting the next $10,000 in repair proceeds that we could use right after taking over the property to help get these units ready, which in a like this, every little bit you can get helps. And it allowed us to get these repairs done right away and to improve the property immediately. But the last kind of thing that happened on it was I had gone out, inspect the property a couple days, and actually interview the maintenance guy about keeping him on before closing, about a week before. And on the desk, I'd noticed this form, and it was a waiver of security deposit. I was like, this is strange. Offering these tenants to have to pay their back rent if they waive their rights to like a $600 security deposit. Like that seems strange. So I notified Charlie of this before closing, and then the day of closing, after the settlement sheet had already been sent out and agreed to by us, the seller showed up at the closing table with waivers for security deposits up to like $6,500.
Let me describe this for you. Just when Spencer was doing the due diligence, the lease audits, and so he's got the rent roll and he's got all of the leases, and the rent roll says that there are $10,000 of security deposits in the bank, and the leases say there are $16,000 worth of security deposits per the leases. So we've got a $6,000 discrepancy there. In other words, that we have to go by what the lease contract says, because that's a contract. The rent roll can be manipulated by anybody sitting at a computer putting in the information. So that's secondary information. We need to account for 16 at the closing table. He's got to prorate or transfer $16,000 of earnest money, of security deposit money, into Spencer's account. And he shows up at the table and says, well, I'm only going to give you 10 because that's what the rent roll says. And to cover the additional 6,000, I went out and had the residents sign this waiver. And it was just a handwritten note that he put together. And this guy's a lawyer too. And basically what it says is, hey, you owe me rent. I'm going to forgive your rent if you forgive this outstanding security deposit. And I remember, we talked about this for an hour or so, Spencer.
Yeah, when we were supposed to be going in to sign, we were signing the loan documents when all this was happening.
Yeah.
So it was quite a mess. And luckily our contract too said, you cannot apply security deposits against the rent. So that protected us. But it became kind of a real standoff at the closing table. And eventually we got credit for the whole amount. But we wouldn't have known there's a discrepancy if we wouldn't have done a thorough lease audit of every lease when we went to do due diligence on the property, where we compared the rent roll to every lease, the end dates, the deposit amounts, the rent amounts, and that's where we discovered those discrepancies.
Right.
So that 1 hour we spent going through the leases saved us $6,500 in deposits that we got credited for at closing.
Right, and if can I share with how the conversation took place at the closing table?
Sure.
With this guy. So Spencer's in with his bank, and I get a phone call from the title company that they got a problem with this security deposit issue, and we thought it had all been resolved. We sent this guy letters, notices, put him on notice, and then he went off to Mexico and never told anybody that he still had an issue with this. So it comes down to, the title company calls me and says, "Do you want to speak to the seller?" And I said, "Yeah, let's talk to him." So they brought me into the closing room, via the phone, and said, what's the story? And I said, listen, there's no way you're going to get away with these $6,500. This is Spencer's money. It clearly states in the contract that you can't do this, and we're not going to do it. And he goes, well, I remember Spencer told me we could do this. I said, I don't care what anybody said. If it's not in the contract, it's not going to happen. He said, well, you go ask Spencer what he wants to do. So I said, okay, fine. Well, no, they originally, Spencer, they wanted to get you on the phone with me. They wanted me to dial you in. I said, I'm not dialing my client in without his permission. So I hung up with them and I called you. I said, what do you want to do? And you said, and folks, listen to this. This is what sealed the deal. Is that, and remember what Spencer had said just a moment ago, that this guy could only close on certain days, and if he didn't close on that day, he'd have to close a month later because of the prepayment penalty that he had to come up with. So that deal had to close that day, or he wasn't getting his money. And he stood to make about $1 million on this deal. He and his partner were going to walk away with $1 million, and we're fighting over $6,500. So Spencer says, listen, I left Fort Scott, Kansas this morning with a certified check for the exact amount of money that the closing agent told me we needed to close. If that number changes, we're not closing today because I'm not going to be able to go back to Fort Scott, Kansas to change everything. And so when I got back on the phone, the seller and I started to go at it a little bit. And I said, listen, forget it. We're not going to, it's a he said, she said type of thing, and I don't really care. This is what it boils down to. If you don't close at this amount today, Spencer cannot close because he's got to go back to Fort Scott, Kansas and get a new check, which I'm going to advise him not to do. So if you want to close today, you got to eat this $6,500. And then you hear a little mumbling in the background, and you could hear the other partner telling Jeffrey Bay to just do the deal. And so then that's when the seller turned, okay, Charlie, we got a deal. Let's close. And that's what did it. That totally sealed the deal. So, hey, Spencer, there's a question on the table here that I want to get on here. And unfortunately, the Ray, who is the one asking the question, we can't unmute him because of this audio pin number. So if anybody wants to ask a question, you got to make sure that your audio pin has been logged in. But Ray asked the question about the let me just get it right here. Can you give the specifics on the investor deal for this? Like, how much preferred return did you offer? How do they get paid? When do you pay them? How much of your own money did you have to put into this deal?
Sure, definitely, and I wanted to touch on that. We raised on this deal about $720,000. Part of that money, about $300,000 of it, we put in ourselves from the refinance we did of our other property. So we turned a piece of pasture land into a 40-unit complex that we did well enough for refinanced it and turned them to an additional 72 units. With some invest money, we raised 400 something on top of that in investor dollars. We strategically took on more investors than we will in the future because we knew a lot of people that wanted to try it out for the first time that had money and potentially a lot more money to do additional deals with us that could fund our business for a long time. But we knew if we just got them started and they trusted us, we provided the returns we said we were going to, that they would be with us for the long haul. So we got them kind of at our investor minimum, which was $50,000 on this deal, so we could get more of them involved. We offered on this a preferred return of 8%, and then we did profit sharing on 20% of the profits over that 8% return. So of every dollar over that 8% return, we pay out 20% of that to the investors.
And you keep 80, obviously.
Right. So if we perform well, we'll make more money, but they're going to get paid up front first.
Now, how often do you pay them?
We pay them quarterly.
Okay.
And we pay the first year. It kind of accumulates. Because during the first year you have the most ups and downs. So we're, according to our documentation and everything, paying out any returns the first 6 months at least. But then after that, it accrues to the first payment after that. We did that because the cash flow is going to be the most, it's going to be at the lowest point right at the beginning, especially on a rehab opportunity like this one is.
Right, and that's something that
we didn't want to put ourselves in a cash flow
Right. I mean, the thing is that when you're doing these types of deals and you're thinking about what you have to pay your investors, I mean, your investors want to see the money being used properly, and many times it's better off that you replow their distributions back into the deal to fix up units and get them leased up than it is to pay them an income off the property. The property could be generating more money. Now, what about the percentage ownership of this deal? How much did you keep? How much did they get? That type of thing.
Yeah, well, it's more how the profits are distributed. So they get the first 8% and then 20% of any profit sharing. We keep the 8% above that 8%. That's all the way through.
Okay.
Now, if we sell or refinance the property, they get their initial investment back before any other returns are paid.
So it's almost like a bond. It's like a preferred bond.
It is.
Yeah.
But, 8%, I feel like is a very strong return for anybody. Right now, if anybody's getting more CD or anything, I'd like to talk to them because most of the CDs out there are paying 0.5% or less, and so we're paying 8%. That's 16 times what they could get anywhere else. Plus, there's depreciation that they get to apply against their returns. So an 8% could be as high as 12. It can be the equivalent of a 12% return in like a stock that's fully taxed.
That's great. That's great. So, all right. So now you took on the property, you closed, you had the right amount of money. Everything went smoothly after the seller realized that it was either $6,500 30 days from now or $1 million today, and he quickly wised up. But you now own it, and you've been through this before. But now, what do you see on this property? How are you going to do?
We're going to do real well. The first 30 days are going to be the trickiest and the hairiest. We've got a property, a lot of them, the reason we're buying them for the price we are is because it hasn't been managed very well. The tenants haven't had a whole lot of oversight at all. I think the first week we owned it, the rent was due on the 1st, and we closed on the 4th, so the 5th was when late notices go out. And so we sent out a ton of late notices that first week after, getting a welcome letter 2 days before.
Yeah.
That was a little strange, but definitely got a lot of them coming down to see us, which is what we wanted. We wanted them to come down and see us, and see that there was somebody new in charge and that things were going to be different. So we've had a lot of those people stop by, but I can tell you, on our other property, we had 90% collections at on this property we had about 40% collections.
Wow.
So we've got a lot of work to do, but from what I've seen, the people are very receptive, and we actually rented 2 units that first week on people that just stopped by, and they're way over what we expected on initial break.
Now, Spencer, I got to ask you this question because this thing always threw me for a loop. Is it true the seller is living on the property?
One thing we had to throw in with him is that he can keep an apartment out there free. He has to pay the utilities for a year or until we get it to 92% occupancy.
Yeah, I don't get it. I just don't get it. But hey, whatever. So
yeah, it's one of those things we had to do to get the deal done.
That's great.
We expect to be 92% pretty quickly, and he'll be getting that eviction letter.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what at 92%, how's this deal going to look?
It's going to be really strong. I think we projected it that we could meet all the returns at an average rental rate of about $510,000 and 92% occupancy. And I just rented an apartment last week that I didn't even have the apartment done yet for $575. So I think we're going to do real well with it.
That's great. So what's the next step? What are you going to do next? What's your encore?
As far as next property? Or?
Yeah, like what do you see yourself going from here?
Well, I think from here, our goal is the next apartment to be a nice step up, to be over 100 units, and probably 90% investor money in that.
Great, Good. Good for you. So, well, folks, if we're coming into an end with our time here with Spencer, if anyone has any questions, you can just type it into the block here if anyone wants to speak to Spencer directly. I guess, Spencer, if people do want to contact you or if they have any questions, you've got a very easy, can I give out your email?
Yeah, sure.
It's Spencer at Cullor, CULLOR.com. And yeah, I mean, definitely.
And you can connect with us anytime. Website apartmentinvestors.com. We have a free newsletter and stuff that we put out there as well.
Yep, it's always good material too. And also, I don't know if Spencer's sales presentation on his equity fund is one of the nicest things I've ever seen. It's really so incredibly well done. So that's definitely if anything like that. I don't know what the free report looks like, but just check out Spencer's graphics on his website if you're looking to set up your own. He's done a very nice job with that. So
yeah, the website has been actually one of our biggest ways to get potential investor leads too.
That's great. Excellent.
As far as the education.
All right, so this is recorded. Let me just wrap up our call here. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then thank you for being on. Just so everybody knows, with the Mastermind Group, you've got the bonus videos that come out once a month. Watch for the next episode in the Look Over My Shoulder video series, and as depending upon when you came into the Mastermind Group, you're all at different segments of that episode. You hear me talking about different properties, and some of them that you're listening to, we've either made offers on or are moving through the process. So it's a building. You're watching a soap opera, so to speak, play out here. New production quality of our Monday morning videos. Some of you will be seeing that soon. And as usual, if any of you have any questions, you can always email me at info@multifamilyinvestingacademy.com. But Spencer, I want to thank you for being on with us. This has been fantastic. I think people really enjoyed it and got a much better perspective on what it's like to get out there and find them, buy them, and manage them, which is the name of this business. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, have a great day.